What makes a good game? Is it latest graphics or art direction? Good music? Mechanics and moment-to-moment gameplay, or is it good storytelling? Does Ys 1, Ancient Ys Vanished, manage to pull it off in 2024, or does it crumble under the weight of time? The original game premiered in 1987, and since 1989 been paired together with Ys 2, Ancient Ys Vanished, the final chapter. A very appropriate name for a sequel. Both games were always meant to have been one, but due to hardware constraints at the time, had to be split into two. There were many ports and iterations of the game over the years, and since I have not played this game until 2024, I will be talking about the version I have played and experienced here. The PSP version, Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles. And even though both games come together, we will be pondering only Ys 1 here, as it does lack certain features compared to Ys 2 and should be examined in its own right. Besides, I haven't played Ys 2 yet. Ys 1 came out during the time where there was no such thing as a JRPG, at least not as we know it now. So the design is not constrained by any preconceived notions of audience expectations or formulae. Indeed, a lot of choices such as conveying of the story, moment-to-moment gameplay and map design is very much experimental. It is a real glimpse back in time to the establishment of the genre, and designers not being afraid to experiment and try out new things, all while having some pretty severe hardware constraints to work within. Even though the updates and iterations of the title added prettier graphics and updated music, under the hood, story and mechanics are, for the most part, how they used to be back in 1987. Bearing that in mind, let's get some obvious things out of the way. PSP Remake has a beautiful, for 2011, pixel art graphics that hold up really well even today in 2024, and an amazing soundtrack. From intro and town areas flowing, peaceful tracks to absolute heavy rock headbangers for dangerous areas and boss battles. All are fantastic reimaginings of the original chiptune music back from the 80s. Let me shut up and have a listen to this for a moment. Ah yes, that's the good stuff right there. It definitely makes it a pleasure exploring the world. But graphics and music alone does not make a good game. Storytelling in Ys 1 is done in a very interesting way. Opening scene sees us resting in bed after a shipwreck that was followed by a nasty encounter with some monstrous wildlife. We get greeted by a brief exposition explaining how we ended up in this predicament and are sent out into the village to stretch our legs. Right here, nothing is stopping us from leaving immediately and starting to explore the wilderness to make our way to the next town over. But if we take a moment and start talking to the NPCs in the village, each one not only has a name, but also provides a unique piece of dialogue that places that NPC in the world with their history, opinions, and most importantly, starts to deepen our understanding of the unfolding situation in the area that we find ourselves in. The game rewards this by first providing an entry to the NPC in the notes section, which I like to call Yspedia. Secondly, it provides you with a tangible reward as well. If you speak to every single NPC in town before talking to the head of the militia, he gives you a short sword before telling you to make your way to the next town over. Every area's NPC have unique dialogue, highlighting current issues of that place, with quest-giving NPCs conveying most of the information to move the plot forward. The amount of times in modern RPGs where you talk to a nameless NPC who took a generic arrow to the knee dialogue, reflecting nothing of the place around them, nor attempting to even try and make it feel alive, is astounding. Yet here we are, with a game from 1987 that in a very limited way manages to surpass some AAA titles. But do note that I said storytelling is done in an interesting way, not that the story is good. Unfortunately, story itself is the standard big bad causes bad things to happen in order to become more powerful, in order to do something that is never truly explained in Ys 1. Not only that, but most of the story revolves around thwarting big bad plans in dungeons with some rare interactions with quest characters in order to trigger plot forward. By the time the game comes to a close, I didn't really care about anyone apart from maybe little boy Danny and his girlfriend Cheryl from the starting port of Barbados. They're just too cute together. Too bad that the protagonist doing what he does probably led to the two being separated. Making the player care about the characters he's working so hard to save definitely did not figure into design decisions of 1987. This is a truly missed opportunity, as even such basic and tired story of defeating an evil lord would have worked so much better if we would have been made to care for the characters with a bit more interaction and non-main story, non-fetch quests. There are some attempts to do that with Sleepwalking Lutajema, but the time spent with the character is so minimal that there is no real connection. Talking of sleepwalking, you find out from Iris, Lutajema's wife, that her husband sleepwalks and he's missing, so you should look around the area to try and find him. Scouring the whole area and wilderness around it turns up nothing. So I had to turn to a game guide right there, and we find out that Luta is really close nearby. Matter of fact, so close, he is on the opposite side of the world map, in the starter town. No in-game clues are given for this. Okay, we go and find him there, in the starter town, and he says, "That's fine, I have sleepwalked here. I'm heading back home." Great. Back in Zepik village, he is nowhere to be found. Out, game guide comes again. And of course, Luta gets sidetracked and is in the middle of wilderness, nowhere close to the road leading to the village. Otherwise, you might have stumbled upon him and provided assistance. A very clever 1987 design choice indeed. The combat system in early Ys games is unique. The so-called bump system makes it fast and furious, more akin to an arcade game rather than a turn-based RPG mechanics that early JRPGs are known for. The way it works is that there are no ranged weapons. You cause damage by bumping into the monster. If you do it front-on, monster also damages you, and you both get pushed away from each other. However, if you attack the monster slightly off-center, from the back or diagonally off-center, you can cause damage without taking any in return and start pushing the monster in the direction of your movement. It is tricky to wrap your head around to begin with, and I certainly had my share of death screen loadings, until it all clicked for me and I grasped the brilliance of the combat. Do note that unlike the PSP version that I've played, the PC version has a proper tutorial that explains how the combat works in detail, making grasping it a breeze. regenerating health while stationary and outdoors ties very nicely to this. If you move, are in the dungeon or fighting a boss, health does not regenerate. But if you're standing still outdoors, it regenerates reasonably quickly. With no random encounters, and being able to engage only the monsters you want, this was fast, fun, and furious. The sound and animations of enemies exploding as you defeat them makes it oh so satisfying, until you encounter the next part of the combat mechanics. You see, strength stat influences both the amount of damage you can dish out and what monsters you can damage. That's right, if your strength is not high enough, you're not able to damage higher level enemies. This is one way for the game to tell you, this area is kind of off limits for you right now, go and explore somewhere else. Oh, by the way, you're dead. You gain more strength with each level and equipping stronger weapons. There is also a ring of power that allegedly doubles your strength. It does not. It doubles your damage. So if you haven't reached the magical threshold to attack an enemy, doubling your damage will still not harm a single hair on their mostly helmeted and horned heads. Not only that, but one level can make all the difference, transforming an almost impossible fight into an easy one, or in the case of bosses, a manageable one. Which segues us perfectly to the young, naive souls looking to dip their toes into their first adventure in Ys 1 are told by their wizened old peers. Do your first run on easy, my child, for Wagulian is there, and he will make you curse the first time you have ever heard the name of Ys. He will make you take your controller and throw it upon the wall in anger, lest you uninstalled the game and burn the hard drive that it was installed on. Do your first run on easy, my child. I played the game on normal. Before going into details about specifics, mechanics that apply to all boss encounters are: first, you do not heal while stationary. Second, you cannot use any items, so no heal potions. And third, rings lose their effect, so no benefit conveyed from double damage or defense or health regeneration, etc. This is beyond Dark Souls level of stuff. Wagulian is the third boss out of total of 7 that you encounter in the game. To say that he is hard or problematic would be to lie to you. Dark Souls has established itself as a title that will grow hair on your chest and make men out of girls. Every single enemy and boss in Dark Souls can be the end of you in a swing or two. The attacks are deliberate, with a weight to them, with every enemy having a certain pattern which is fun to learn and overcome. Wagulian also has a pattern. The moment you see him, he splits into hundreds of separate butts that take up anywhere between half and a tenth of the screen. And they all home in on you. Each individual butt's touch dealing you damage while being invulnerable themselves. They proceed chasing you around the screen until the boss again recombines into one entity, at which stage he is vulnerable. He can be attacked, but he can and does fake the recombine animation up to 3 times in a row. This would be a decently fun mechanic apart from 3 issues. First, the bump attack system means that you have to bump into the boss in order to damage them, and the pacing is at a breakneck speed. Second, collision detection does not extend to the whole model of the recombined boss, but to only about a quarter of his base, basically a quarter of his feet. And third, Vagulian recombines for approximately 1.5 seconds. So what ends up happening is you run, trying to stay as far away from the bats as possible. See the recombine animation begin, that can be faked. Try to reverse your movement and run back towards the boss, aim slightly off-center and miss the pixels responsible for collision detection, and get hit with multitude of bats as the boss splits again, repeating the cycle until you die again and again and again. Out of the first 10 or so attempts at the boss, only about 2 had any hits scored on him before I got downed. I have had to look at a number of guides with all of them simply recounting the pattern and saying that this is one of the toughest bosses in the game. Good luck. The only thing left to do was to get good, and I did. I got good, and I got lucky, and I eventually beat the Vagulian. I did not feel like I've mastered the game mechanically. I did not feel like I have learned and accomplished something. It just felt exhausting and unfun. Something that I had to do or abandon the game forever. Then I encountered Consklard. Thankfully, figuring out that even if there was a kind of bullet hell situation with this boss in a very restricted space, you can just kind of tank the damage and out DPS the boss instead of trying to deal with another badly designed boss encounter. So after only a laughable 5 deaths later, I was ready to take on the last backstab that the game had to offer. The Dark Fact, final boss, and an encounter rivaling in its frustration the Vagulian. You are on a platform floating in space, in the center of the screen. Boss bounces off the edges of the screen pretty fast in a very much Pong-like manner, with the collision pixels in his feet. So when he does that with the upper edge of the screen, he goes out of view. There are 3 at a time fireballs shooting from random directions at all times, causing damage every time they hit you. Finally, when you do bump into the boss to damage him, square of the platform that you stand on falls off into space, and if you're not fast enough to move away, you insta-die. As you cannot jump over the parts of the platform that have fallen away, as the battle progresses and you do more damage to the boss, you get less and less space to maneuver, with a higher chance of being hit by fireballs, trapped in a small platform island, and insta-die due to not having any space to run away. We should all be very grateful that the game design has evolved since 1987, and we do not have to experience these badly designed boss encounters in most of our games. Another place where the game shows its age is pacing. Since progression and leveling the character ties directly into combat and how certain parts of the map are soft-locked, it would be natural to assume that you would level up throughout the game. That is not the case. As a matter of fact, about halfway to about 2/3 of the game in, right about the time you face Vagulian, you either reach your max level of 10 or are very close to it. A little earlier than that, you have your last money spent. And from then on, you no longer need any money at all. The best and second best armor and weapons cannot be bought and are acquired through exploration and story respectively, which is not a bad decision, but there is literally no point in accumulating any money or fighting any of the enemies from then on. By the time you reach your last dungeon, Darm Tower, you end up ignoring most of the enemies. Talking of the best equipment in the game, you acquire it shortly before the last boss. And spoiler alert, if you have been paying attention, this is not the optimal equipment to use when fighting the last boss either. And while it definitely helps to get through some of the tougher minions, Dwarf Ambush is really well done, and this is where you truly need the Fire Sword, and of course, acquire it right there. But this is so close to the end that for the most part, it doesn't even matter. Finally, we come to the dreaded Darm Tower and level design. Ys 1 does not have a minimap, hankering back to early tabletop role-playing, where the party would need to map out the dungeon layout on a piece of paper as they go through it. It works in tabletop really well, and in early turn-based CRPGs too. With Ys 1, however, as the exploration and combat is at such a breakneck speed, it fails pretty miserably. What exacerbates the problem that in many dungeons, in the mines for example, you have very small light radius and can barely see the environment around you, with enemies jumping out of the darkness at a moment's notice. And by the time you stop to get your bearings and jot something down on paper, you are dead. This leads to a lot of frustrating backtracking and going around in circles. I breathed a deep sigh of relief once the mines area was over. Little did I know that the Darm Tower was looming menacingly on the horizon. In the Darm Tower, you get to go up and down levels either on a balcony that runs on the outside in a circle and or spiral around the tower, or you can also do that on the inside of the tower from one of the archways with a ladder leading up or down. You can also go up or down the tower by simply walking a little further down the corridor, so the floor you are on can change without a specific indication of the archway to go through. As the balcony of the tower runs in a circular pattern around the outside of the tower, you can go around full 360 degrees and come back to where you have started from. But as you're running in a 2D plane, it is hard to say whether you're back to where you have started or not. And as mentioned earlier, sometimes it's a spiral, so doing so will get you up a level instead. This leads to a misleading, on purpose design of levels, working hard to make you lost and disoriented. Some floors of the tower are mirror mazes, where you walk through mirrors that act as portals and need to find your way through to get to the next floor. But at least there, you know that you're trying to figure out an obvious maze. Did I mention you need to do some backtracking here? And if there is backtracking involved, you know that Luther Gemma is responsible. You better remember where he is, or you'd be trying to find your way back through mirror mazes and confusing floor layouts trying to find them. Or just look up a guide to at least give you an indication of what floor he's on. The guide I used gave me the wrong floor. Right. And through confusing and meandering floors of Darm Tower and this retrospective, we come back to the question, what makes a good game? Is it latest graphics or art direction? Good music, mechanics, and moment-to-moment gameplay, or is it good storytelling? It is, of course, a mix of all these things that combined creates an engaging, entertaining, and memorable experience for us. And while there are some outstanding things about Ys 1, like music, the fast and furious bump combat system, and how the area background and current situation is introduced to us through each insignificant NPC having their own short paragraph of a story, there are too many relics of the past here. The tired, by the numbers defeat the evil lord story. No real attempt to make us care for any of the characters. Bad pacing, obtuse by design maps and quest design, some seriously frustrating boss encounters relegates Ys 1, Ancient Ys Vanished, to a fascinating study of 1987 game design that I was happy to have experienced and would be even happier to never revisit again. Not every game is a masterpiece, and not every game can stand up to the test of time, and that's what makes those rare few that do extra special. But these are just my thoughts and opinions. Have you played Ys 1, and what did you think? Let me know below. Until next time.